Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm so excited about doing this video. You guys don't even know how excited I am. I have been working on this new subject matter for months. Like 4 months I have been working on this and I'm so excited to finally share it with you guys. Basically today I'm going to be talking about makeup history, and you guys probably might have remembered if you have been on my channel for quite a while, that I did a video like over a year ago on ancient Egyptian makeup, and that was basically combining two of my favorite things, makeup and history, and I loved creating that video. I loved doing it, and then I looked back on it like several months later and I was kind of like, wow, this video did pretty well and I had fun filming this, so we might as well like make it into like a little bit more of like a topic on my channel. We might as well extend this and do like more videos similar to this, like talking about various aspects of makeup history. And I was very interested in making that like a little bit of a topic a reality, and I wanted to do it really badly, but I wanted to do it in like a very good way. I wanted to make sure that the videos I was creating on this topic were interesting, were informative, and above all were entertaining to watch. And I wanted to make sure that I would come out with videos that were intriguing, that were not like the cookie cutter videos that you guys might see on this topic already. So basically what I'm trying to get at is that I'm really proud of this little subject matter. I've been working and researching on a whole bunch of different topics in this little niche for so much time now. I have been like doing this since last fall, and today I'm about to introduce to you guys my first video of this topic, which is going to be all about Elizabethan makeup, more specifically Queen Elizabeth I of England's makeup. And I am so excited about doing this because Queen Elizabeth has been on my radar for ages now. Like, I've been so fascinated with her because she was ruling in the 1500s. She was such like a very prominent monarch. She is still one of the most, if not the most prominent monarch in English history. And I just like have been so inspired by her, and something that's always really talked about and discussed is her makeup and her beauty regimen, because it wasn't just beauty and makeup and appearance, it was a political asset for her. Her makeup and her appearance was basically used to cement her political status in the country and in the world. But before I get started, I do want to talk to you guys about who Queen Elizabeth was. I want to give you guys a little bit of a background on her and her as a person, her as a royal, her as a political figure, because I feel like it's really important, especially with Queen Elizabeth, to talk about where she came from, how she came to be, and how she came to the throne, because all of that intertwines to create her story. And I feel like, especially with this series, I don't want to just talk about makeup, I want to talk about people's lives. And I feel like especially I have to talk about Queen Elizabeth because her story is so fascinating. Now, looking at Queen Elizabeth's history, her father was Henry VIII, her mother was Anne Boleyn, and when she was born, she was expected to be a son. Everyone expected that she would be the male heir that Henry VIII so desperately wished for, because at this time, if you wanted to continue your dynasty and if you wanted to really legitimize your power, your safety, and your right to rule, you basically had to prove that you were able to continue the line by bearing sons. And if you had a daughter and if you were a royal, the most that the daughter was expected to do was marry a foreign royal to basically strengthen ties between two countries. That was like the only way a daughter could become useful in most people's eyes. So it was only after the death of her father, the death of her younger brother, who later ascended the throne, the death of her sister, who was next in line after her brother, that she was even able to become Queen of England. And again, this is not something that people expected her to do. It was only like a little bit later in her life that anyone ever saw the potential that she would even become queen. So when she took the throne on the 17th of November in 1558, she was expected to marry a foreign royal, because even her sister before her, who herself was a female ruler, had decided to marry King Philip of Spain. She was not someone that really wanted to rule alone herself. However, Queen Elizabeth was different. She was well aware of the dangers of giving your power to somebody else. And she basically knew that she wanted to rule on her own, and she was very against the idea of marriage, much to the chagrin of pretty much everyone that was observing her at this time. So she basically had to prove to her people and to the world that she, a woman, was able to basically take the role of a king and a queen, was able to be firm, resilient, and strong, which was the role given to a man, and was able to be kind, gentle, and benevolent, the role given to a queen, or the characteristics given to a queen, all in one. So she was able to have the characteristics of a strong male and a strong female in one body, which was her. In a way, she was a little bit of a hermaphrodite ruler because she had to legitimize herself by proving that she was enough, that she did not need a man to basically rule for her, to help her make decisions that she couldn't make herself. She had to prove that she was enough. And what's really fascinating to me is that she used a variety of techniques, a variety of avenues to cement her power and her eligibility, her willingness and her desire to basically be this amazing ruler. And what's really fascinating to me is how many different aspects of herself that she used to prove this, to prove that she was a good ruler and that she was capable of ruling this great country herself. And what's interesting to me is that whenever you look at portraits of her or paintings, you see her as this great and powerful female ruler. She's dressed beautifully, but she's dressed very opulently. Throughout the paintings that she is featured in, you see a variety of symbolism. For example, when England defeated the Spanish Armada in 1588, you see a painting painted around that time in which it is clear that she's trying to convey that she has a very strong hold on the world in general. So you kind of get how strong symbolism was at this time, especially in painting. And what is really interesting is the fact that she did her makeup in this very specific way. She combined the social graces and the societal norms for beauty at the time with the idea that she was essentially a virgin queen. It was very uncouth to think of her as someone who had sex because she was supposed to be this very pure, very virginal figure in politics, essentially. And her makeup and her beauty regimen basically served to strengthen this and to justify this to the world. And in this video, I'm going to reference some historians, and I'm going to go into her makeup, and I'm also going to go into the things that she used. And of course, we're going to touch on the societal norms for beauty at the time and what beauty was during the Elizabethan era. So when you look at Queen Elizabeth, the things that really stand out are this very like white, sort of like just lily white skin. The fact that her lips are like this very vivid red, and then her cheeks are this very like beautiful rouged effect, and of course her hair, which was brilliant and red, and that was kind of the symbol for her. Like, she was a natural redhead, her father was a redhead, and she basically had this like beautiful flame of red hair. So all of this basically came together to form the image that she projected from youth into her old age. So let's of course start with the skin. So you can see how light and how white and pale her skin was. This was a very much of a status symbol. From ancient times up until the end of the 1800s, you see that a really important part in beauty was the fact that you had to have very unblemished, very pure, very snow white skin. This was considered a status symbol because it was basically thought that if you had this very light, very pale looking skin, that you didn't have to work for a living, that you didn't have to be out in the fields, that you weren't of lower class, but yet you were from the upper classes, you were from a very luxurious lifestyle, you were from a good family. So light, pale skin was considered a status symbol, especially for women. It was also a great symbol of femininity, which was something that Elizabeth, of course, sought to emulate. However, early in her reign, Elizabeth came down with smallpox. This was about in 1562. And smallpox was a disease that left a huge, very prominent scarring on one's face. So Elizabeth sought to conceal this by essentially covering it up with makeup, because something that I haven't mentioned, but I will now, is as the ruler of England, Elizabeth had to appear in robust health. She had to have the appearance of a strong, beautiful, healthy woman, because if she was healthy, then her country was healthy, and that's the image that she wanted to project to her people and to the world, and that's why it was so important to have like this very healthy looking appearance. However, the way to promote this healthy look was actually not very healthy at all, because she actually used ceruse on her face. The lips at the time were supposed to be very small and very red. They were supposed to stand out from the face. They were considered beautiful, but they were very small because you had to really emphasize the eyes. The eyes were the thing that you really wanted to emphasize because they were supposed to appear beautiful and huge. And that's why you don't have a lot of eyebrows in Elizabethan beauty. You don't have a very large mouth, because the eyes were supposed to be the main thing in the face. They were supposed to be the most attractive part of the face and the most open. So that's why you had smaller lips, and you had pretty much an absence of eyebrows. So now that we're familiar of the standards of beauty for Elizabethan times, let's go into the actual makeup routine. During the research for this video, I familiarized myself with the channel English Heritage, and they published a video that basically detailed Queen Elizabeth's makeup routine. And I learned a lot from that video, and what's really interesting to me is the fact that they claim that Queen Elizabeth actually used raw egg whites on her face as a primer. You basically would put the egg whites on the face and you would brush it on with like a brush, which looked very much like a paintbrush because that's what would have been used at the time. And then when it's set, you would take it off with a little bit of linen dipped into rose water, which was very much a more luxurious product, just as it is now. Well, I mentioned before that Queen Elizabeth had smallpox, so that made it imperative for her to cover this up. However, the methods for covering this up were very, dare I say, harmful. She actually used a concoction on her face called ceruse, which was white powdered lead mixed in with vinegar. And this is a very toxic mix of ingredients, because what would happen is that on the face, when you would sweat, the sweat would mix in with the ceruse and basically cause the mixture to eat away at your skin bit by bit. So this was a very gradual process, but what ended up happening is a lot of people that used ceruse, not just Queen Elizabeth, had to deal with even greater skin demarcation and skin damage from using this concoction, so they would have to use even more of it, thus providing a greater level of toxicity for their skin. And it was basically a big mess, of course, but we now know about the dangers of lead and the dangers of mixing like all these harsh ingredients and applying them to your face. But of course, during Elizabethan times, this wasn't very well known. This wasn't really known at all. So they would use white lead on their face. And this could, of course, give you blood poisoning and cause further demarcation on your face, which would result in you using more of the ceruse to cover your damaged skin. So it would essentially create a very deadly cycle, and there are a few people in history who have died from using ceruse on their skin and who have died from blood poisoning as a result. Now let's talk about the lips. Now the lips, as I mentioned before, were very red. That was considered very much in style. They were supposed to be like a little bit small. That was considered to be the standard of beauty at the time. And to achieve this very red mouth, a variety of ingredients would have been used, some of which we are very familiar with today. Some of these ingredients included madder, cochineal, which is basically crushed beetles, which is actually still used in makeup today, and other ochre-based compounds. But what was quite harmful was vermilion, and this is actually mercuric sulfide, which of course in itself is mercury, which you guys know is poisonous for you. So again, that would go on the lips to create this very vivid red color that would of course be very toxic for you. And this would be laid on very thickly to provide this very vivid red color on the lips. And of course, this would also be used on the cheeks to really give like this very vivid, very red kind of healthy appearance. And this was used for a variety of women, but especially Queen Elizabeth herself, because Elizabeth was supposed to promote this picture of health. So she would have very rosy cheeks, which would be achieved with the assistance of rouge. Now let's talk about the eyes, which is quite interesting in itself. So not a lot was used on the eyes, but the eyes were essentially very important. You were supposed to have like these very bright, beautiful, vivid eyes. And what's especially interesting and a little bit troubling was the fact that really dilated pupils was something that was very attractive and very much in vogue back then. So what women would do is that they would basically put drops of belladonna into their eyes, which you guys know is a very toxic ingredient. So this would, of course, cause their pupils to dilate, which would be considered something quite beautiful and something quite sensual to have like dilated pupils. And this was prone to causing blindness because belladonna is not a very nice ingredient to use, especially in your eye area. Something that would also be used to really just emphasize the eyes a little bit and to provide this like very wide set appearance when it came to eyes was kohl, which has been used throughout history and was especially used around the Elizabethan times to basically outline the eyes and emphasize them. And plucked eyebrows was considered something that was very beautiful, especially for a court lady. During this time, much like other periods in history, the court, the people that were surrounding the royal family, and the queen herself were considered to be pinnacles of fashion and beauty standards. So people would look to them for inspiration, and they would look to them to set trends and to set ideals of beauty, much like we look at celebrities today, but even on a grander scale. And what was especially interesting was that for them, having a high brow, having your hairline start farther away from your face was considered very beautiful as well. So you can see that in a lot of portraits of Elizabethans, particularly of Queen Elizabeth, you see her emulating all of these different aspects of beauty for the time, and this all comes together to form this image of Queen Elizabeth. Something that's really quite tragic almost is the fact that Queen Elizabeth basically had this regimen and she had this ideal of beauty that she couldn't let up. As she aged, she would wear more and more makeup, and she would actually turn to wearing wigs for her hair, because towards the end of her life her hair was very fine, and of course you couldn't portray that, especially if you were a political figure. So she would be wearing wigs and she would be wearing layers and layers of makeup, and it was to the point that only her closest ladies in waiting would be seeing her without any makeup, would be seeing her without that wig on. She would basically only appear in front of anybody when she had her wig, her makeup, and these opulent gowns, and she was supposed to maintain this image. And no matter what happened, she was supposed to maintain this figure, and she was supposed to be Queen Elizabeth, the ruler. And when you look at portraits of her in her later years, she still had this very powerful image of having this beautiful opulent kind of image, and that was something that was very enforced even when Elizabeth the person didn't necessarily reflect a Queen Elizabeth the image. She still had to maintain that image, she still had to maintain that face of power and that picture of health and vitality even in her later life. And yes, I think that it is so incredibly fascinating just to look at Queen Elizabeth, because when women didn't have a lot of freedom, when women weren't expected to do much at all, she basically just defied all expectations, and she was a very powerful ruler and a very powerful monarch. She was a very good ruler. The time of her rule is known as the Elizabethan Golden Age because of how hard she worked to promote peace and prosperity, even when she was met with several moments of rebellion and she was constantly in danger. So she just basically had to weather all of these storms, and she had to do so with a very strong demeanor and a very straight face, if you will. And I feel like that's just that's very admirable. My camera just stopped recording, so that's why there's a little bit of a shift in this frame. I think that she had to overcome so much, and the fact that she was able to rule for so long and the time of her rule was known as the Golden Age says a lot. So all of this was done when she was a woman and she was basically in a world full of men. And I think that's very inspiring. So yes, that's pretty much the end of this video. I hope you found it interesting, enjoyed it, learned something about her makeup, her beauty, and as well as the person that she really was. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye guys.